let's get some analysis now around the importance of this COP29, and we're going to analyze both COP29 and the ongoing G20 summit. And for that, we speak to University of Johannesburg's Centre for African Diplomacy and Leadership. The senior research fellow there is Dr Oscar van Heerden. Dr van Heerden, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. Before we talk to the finance plans, those pledges by the rich nations, let's start with what was raised by the UN chief of, it is called the UN's World Meteorological Organization, or WMO for short. I know I'm butchering this word. They had these words to say at the start of the COP29 last week, and that is that 2024 is on track to become the hottest year in recorded human history, surpassing 2023, which holds the record right now. How important are world leaders viewing this matter of climate change? Because no doubt the world is experiencing it right now.
No, you're absolutely right, Collie. You know, the truth is that it seems that depending on which political administration is in control in some of the leading Western countries, that is the approach they take towards climate change. You would recall when President Trump was president of the United States in 2016 to 2020, he withdrew America's from the Paris Accord, which then meant that it was a significant blow to the sustainable achievements envisaged for climate change. He is now going to return to the US administration, and we will have to see whether the attitude has changed or not. He clearly falls in the category of denialism with regards to climate change. Having said that, there's obviously a number of countries that take it serious, that understand that something has to be done. But when we look at the COP29 challenges around the negotiations for the various funding and finance that must be made available, it's clear that the commitment is there, but they are not willing to actually move on the issue.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want to lecture on. And I'm glad you've invoked the US President-elect, Donald Trump. At the start of the conference last week, I listened to a lot of analysis with the observers saying that the absence of countries like the United States is a worrying factor. But there were those who were saying, actually, that's a non-issue. What is important about this conference of parties this time around is that it's got to do with those financial pledges. Have those started translating into real money, which is what is needed in countries like South Africa?
No, absolutely. I mean, there has been a small tranche of money that was made available to South Africa, but the bigger chunk is still outstanding. President Ramaphosa has been clanging on the door saying, if you want us to honor the commitments, then the money must be made available. It's true, in the insert that you played, Polly, your journalist is correct when he says that we are still very much reliant on coal in a very huge way. Although we have a mixed energy plan, we do have a little bit of wind, a bit of solar, a bit of nuclear, but the bulk of our energy supply is still reliant on coal. And if the West wants us to sustain the commitments and move away from coal, then they need to make the money available, and that money has not been forthcoming.
Well, I'd like to transition then, talking about the world's rich nations, and the leaders who lead these countries are gathered right now in Rio de Janeiro. That's in Brazil. It's at the G20 summit, and President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is soon to become the president of the G20 as Brazil hands over, he has addressed that summit, and top of the agenda of his speech was social inclusion and the fight against poverty and hunger. That appears to be what South Africa is going to be clinging on to as it takes the presidency of the G20. But let's remember, South Africa and its presidency of the G20 is not only about South Africa, it's about the continent at large. How much influence do you think we are really going to have as a continent to achieve these stated goals I've just outlined?
Well, this is entirely up to South Africa and the South African government. Next year, I'm told through the grapevines that they intend to have the biggest G20 summit ever. And they're going to achieve this by inviting just about every African leader to attend the summit next year in Johannesburg. And I think it's a clear indication of the seriousness of which President Ramaphosa and his government wants to place the Africa agenda, to put Africa first, and to say that in as much as there is now a free trade agreement in Africa, in as much as the African Union is now a member of the G20, we still feel that there are issues that needs to be addressed directly. One of which we just discussed is climate change, but also just in keeping with the social development, sustainable development goals, which tragically this current G20 in Brazil is indicating very little progress have been made. And so when you talk of a sustainable planet, when you talk of social inclusion and combating poverty and hunger, then these are worrying times. And I think that South Africa is going to have their work cut out for the better part of next year, if indeed they want to make a success of the summit towards the end of the year.
Well, all of these, Dr. van Heerden, can quickly become a wishful thinking by South Africa and indeed, by extension, the continent, because, as you mentioned earlier, the man who is seen as a big climate change skeptic is President-elect of the United States, Donald Trump. But add to that the fact that there are many programs that are funded, for example, in countries like South Africa, that are funded by America. You can look at the healthcare space. That tells you just how important the US is. But his approach to things, I'm talking about Trump now, is that of a transactional leader. In other words, what is the US going to get in exchange for what it is giving South Africa? Could all of these simply become undone because of Donald Trump? And let's not forget, Dr. van Heerden, just how powerful he has become in this term of office that he is going to be occupying, because he not only won the presidency, but he's also won the houses of Congress, the Senate, and that tells you the political power that he has been given by the people of America.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, we're going to have a difficult time with Donald Trump's presidency. I suspect, and I put it out there, that Donald Trump is going to come to the G20 next year and give President Ramaphosa an ultimatum. Either you are with us or you are against us. I think that the trade war that is happening between the United States and China is going to play a part. The chip war that is with China, the attitude that he has towards Africa as a continent. And you are right, it's very transactional. It is about what is it that the USA is gaining by having friendly trade relations with you. I think AGOA is going to yet again become into the spotlight, and we would have to navigate those things in terms of diplomacy. Our recently appointed Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool, will have to do some clever footwork in the hollowed halls of the UN and Washington, D.C. But I do think it is going to present us with a clear challenge, and we need to be clear as to where we're going to be standing in terms of our foreign policy objectives going forward.